This right here is still the best case in the micro ATX form factor. I'm going to talk about what makes this still such a good choice, even in 2026, a few years after it's been released. Welcome to Machines and More. Here on this channel, I cover a variety of tech topics. Today, we're talking about PC cases, specifically mATX case. This is the Lian Li A3 mATX, which I reviewed at launch, but I wanted to revisit this one after a few years and talk about the reason that this is still the best mATX case that I think you can get right now in 2026. And that is really because it doubles down on some of the key reasons where you might be considering an mATX case to begin with. So here, this is the black A3, and it's a little bit worse for the wear as I've done numerous builds in this one. This iteration has the ASUS TUF B850 mATX board, and that is an excellent AMD board for the price. The biggest strength of this case is its size. It's not an SFF case that is simply mATX compatible. Neither is it approaching a mid-tower in size and artificially or somewhat held back to only supporting an mATX board. Like the mATX board form factor itself, this one is an in-between size at 26 or so liters. It's somewhat in the middle of that so-called medium form factor spectrum, and it balances compactness with ease of build. The board doesn't ever feel like it's being squeezed or contorted in order to fit inside of this case when you're building, and I think that's a big plus for people that are looking to build in this form factor. You're not necessarily looking for the smallest possible form factor, right? And you're also trying to stay more compact than mid-tower, and that's kind of the appeal here, is that it's in that balanced spectrum of the PC case size. Now, doing this one again after so many Lian Li B4 builds, it felt a lot more relaxed in comparison, but the dimensions really aren't that much larger. The A3 just manages to give you volume in the right places where most builders will feel comfortable, and the dimensions also lead us to the second thing, is that despite being 26 liters, the cooling capability is still very strong relative to a much larger case. You can still place your liquid cooler up to 360 millimeters up at the top of the board, which is a very sensible placement for a liquid cooler. In this iteration, I've got the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. This particular build is a gaming specific build, so I think right now the 7800X 3D at the current prices, which is somewhere around 330 US, it's a very, very good choice. It still gives you that 64 megabytes of 3D cache like you would get with the 9800X 3D, which is the current gaming king, but its stock voltage frequency curve is at a more efficient spot. And even though that you might find the cooling through the IHS is a little bit more challenging just because of the positioning of the 3D cache die, the 7800X 3D is still a very, very capable chip. And for gaming only, unless you're pairing with the highest of highest end graphics cards like a 5090, you're not going to see too much of a meaningful difference between this and the 9800X 3D. Now, I could easily put a 360 millimeter radiator here at the top without any concerns. I don't really need to with the 7800X 3D, and we just delegate that spot to fans because the 7800X 3D is a lower powered CPU at max draw. Here I'm using Cooler Master's V4 Alpha 3D-HP. You might have seen the V8 3D-HP reviews that I've done recently, which is a very incredible single tower. This is a more simple version of that with two U-shaped pipes that also connect to two 3D-HP vertical pipes. Now, if we're talking cars, a V4 is kind of a funny name, I have to admit. I guess you could do a V4 in motorcycles, but I digress. This is a single tower with two fans, and there's a kind of an integrated cover that's attached to the two fans, and it still attaches to the heatsink with clips. The A3 also allows for a large air cooler up to 165 millimeters, which will cover a large selection of big towers. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful with dual towers and the height, because the ram side fan can push the height above 165 millimeters if there is an overlap. But the bigger single tower V8 3D-HP would also be an excellent choice in this case when you do need to cool more power hungry CPUs, and that doesn't have any of that RAM overlap. The top fan section has a lot of flexibility where you place the fans. Now here, there's going to be plenty of cooling flexibility. I chose to go with a set of MZXT's F280X. This is a 2x140 single frame LCP fan set. It's a high performance fan ensemble, and I went with a 280 here versus the 360. While I have done 360mm fans or three 120mm fans here at the top, the one over the power supply can be a little bit obstructed. The 280 footprint utilizes the full width of the case over this open area, so it's a very good option. I'll show you the thermals here. They're quite good. There's not really any concerns here with this V4 Alpha 3D-HP cooler. On the rest of the board, I've got 32 gigs of 𝘛𝘏𝘚 DDR5. You don't need particularly fast RAM with the 3D V-Cache chips if your main purpose is gaming. So this is an area that you're not, completely able to spend, which, given the way of the world, that's definitely an area that you can look into a slower kit. For storage, you can utilize the numerous M.2 slots on the board. And that's one area that mATX boards will give you a little bit more capability versus an ITX boards, since you can often do 3 to 4 M.2 drives on the front side of the board. With this one, I'm using BioWin's M560. This is a Gen 5 drive. It's a little more affordable Gen 5 drive, but the speeds on the drive still get to like 11,000 megabytes per second for sequential reads. But this one is a little bit more affordable than your faster Gen 5 drives. So I'm still waiting to see when the drive will hit major retailers, but when it does become readily available, it's going to be a good choice. Even if you are running 2.5-inch SSDs, the case supports it with multiple mounting spots and even 3.5-inch drives if you have space at the bottom. For this build, with the graphics card, I'm running the ASUS Prime Radeon RX 9070 XT. It's a great card. With the way GPU prices have been trending, this is now running a little bit more than when it first launched, I think. But I think the pricing run-up has been a little bit more reasonable on the Radeon side versus the NVIDIA side. Another strength of the A3 is that it has plenty of GPU space. Length up to 415 millimeters if you can go all the way to the end here. The thickness in theory can be an 80 millimeter thick card, but that'll depend on your board. This mATX board in particular starts the primary expansion slot at slot position 2, so you will lose a slot. So you'll have to keep those considerations in mind which board you're using. But in spite of the compact dimensions, builders will have relatively few restrictions in terms of the graphics card, and it's also relatively easy to get the card in. So if you have space under the card, you can also run some case fans there just to further help with the cooling. But I think as long as you have either top or bottom, I think you're good to go. On the power supply side, I have the ASUS TUF ATX power supply. This is a 150mm ATX unit, and you don't have to worry too much about ATX power supply section because a lot of them will fit. If you find that you have some GPU length interference, you can actually adjust the power supply cage up, or you can bring it down if you don't. All the way up is going to be at the expense of cooling over this spot, but most of the time I think you can make your setup work. This is a 1000 watt unit. You don't really need 1000 watts for this particular setup, but it does place the efficiency at the sweet spot of the curve. Most of the time you won't have any problem finding an affordable ATX power supply in that 150mm range. And the affordability aspect of ATX and mATX boards is further enhanced by the fact that this case is still only $70 US or so. So you can actually step up and get the wood version for $90, and that features a flow-through front. But no product is perfect, and revisiting this one, I was reminded of a few things. One, the flip side of the A3's price positioning means that the materials are a bit par for the course. I have had a few of these toolless panel clips break, and I think the case came with spares, but I haven't bothered looking for them. The panels are also riveted in place, so you can't just take the top or the bottom of the inner chassis off just to make building a little bit easier. And the panels, they do feel a little bit thinner, but even today with newer mATX cases showing up, if I had to put a one-liner on this one, is that it still manages to be the case that strikes a magical Goldilocks-like balance for size, capability, performance, and pricing. So that'll do it for this revisit. I'll have links down below. Big thanks for watching.